The sun blazed overhead as Marcus Thompson guided his horse through the narrow canyon trails of Arizona territory. It was 1885, and he had been working as a surveyor for the railroad company for 3 years now. His job was to map out potential routes through the rugged landscape, but today something felt different. The usual sounds of desert wildlife had gone eerily quiet. Marcus was a tall, lean man in his early 30s with weathered hands and keen blue eyes that missed nothing. He had learned to read the land like a book during his time in the West. Born in Pennsylvania, he had come out here seeking adventure and a fresh start after the Civil War. What he found was a deep respect for the harsh beauty of the desert and its people. As he rounded a bend in the canyon, his horse suddenly reared up, whinnying in fear. Marcus quickly dismounted and grabbed the reins, trying to calm the animal. That's when he heard it, a low, rumbling sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. It wasn't quite human, but it wasn't animal either. Following the sound, Marcus led his horse carefully along the canyon floor. The walls rose high on either side, painted in layers of red and orange rock that told stories of millions of years. Ancient petroglyphs decorated some surfaces, reminders that this land had been home to people long before any white settlers arrived. The rumbling grew louder as Marcus approached a section where massive boulders had fallen from the canyon walls. Some looked recent, probably from the flash flood that had swept through the area 2 weeks ago. The local Apache had warned him about traveling here too soon after the rains, but the railroad company was pushing for quick results. As he got closer, Marcus realized the sound was coming from behind the largest boulder. Someone was trapped back there, and from the deep tone of the voice, it was a very large someone. Marcus had heard stories from other settlers about the Apache people who lived in these lands. Some spoke of giants among them, warriors of incredible size and strength who protected their tribes. Marcus called out, "Hello? Can you hear me? Are you hurt?" The rumbling stopped abruptly. Then, a voice, speaking broken English mixed with what sounded like Apache words, responded. "White man, you help or you go." "I'm here to help," Marcus called back. "What happened? Are you injured?" There was a long pause before the voice replied. "Rocks fall. 3 days ago. Water comes fast, then rocks fall. I cannot move big stone." Marcus circled around the boulder pile, looking for a way to see the trapped person. On the far side, he found a small gap where he could peer through. What he saw took his breath away. A massive Apache warrior sat wedged between two huge rocks. He was easily the largest man Marcus had ever seen, probably close to 7 feet tall with shoulders as wide as a door frame. His long black hair was braided with feathers and beads, and despite being trapped for 3 days, his dark eyes showed no fear, only a calm acceptance of a situation. "My name is Marcus," he called through the gap. "What's your name?" "I'm called Thunder Bear," came the reply. "Son of Chief Rising Eagle of the Chiricahua." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. He knew that name. Chief Rising Eagle was one of the most respected and feared Apache leaders in the territory. His tribe had managed to avoid being forced on a reservation so far, and there had been increasing tensions with the military. Thunder Bear wasn't just any Apache warrior. He was the chief's son. "Thunder Bear, I'm going to get you out of there," Marcus said. "But I need to figure out how to move these rocks safely." "Why white man help Apache?" Thunder Bear asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than suspicion. Marcus thought about that question as he examined the rock pile. Why was he helping? The easy answer was that it was the right thing to do. But there was more to it. In his 3 years in Arizona, he had seen both the beauty and the tragedy of what was happening to the Apache people. Their way of life was being destroyed, their land taken, their families torn apart. Yet they maintained a dignity and connection to this harsh land that humbled him. "Because you're a human being in trouble," Marcus replied simply. "That's reason enough." Thunder Bear was quiet for a moment. Then Marcus heard what might have been a chuckle. "You're a different white man, Marcus." Working in the desert heat, Marcus spent the next several hours studying the rock formation. The main boulder that had Thunder Bear pinned was enormous, probably weighing several tons. But Marcus noticed that it was balanced precariously on some smaller rocks. If he could move the right supporting stones, the whole thing might shift enough to create an escape route. The problem was doing it safely. One wrong move, and the entire pile could collapse, crushing Thunderbear instantly. Marcus would need to be very careful and very smart about this. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus shared his water with Thunderbear through the gap in the rocks. The Apache warrior had been without water for nearly a day, having finished his supply the day before. Marcus also offered some of his dried beef, though Thunderbear politely declined. "You save water for yourself," Thunderbear insisted. "Desert not forgive weakness." But Marcus continued to share, and eventually Thunderbear accepted. As they talked, Marcus learned more about the man he was trying to save. Thunderbear told him about growing up in the mountains, learning to hunt, and track from his father. He spoke of his people's connection to the land, how every rock and tree and stream had meaning and memory. "This canyon," Thunderbear explained, "my grandfather's grandfather hunted here. His spirit still watches over this place." Marcus found himself fascinated by Thunderbear's stories. The Apache way of seeing the world was so different from his own upbringing. Where Marcus saw rock formations and geological features, Thunderbear saw the homes of spirits and the footprints of ancestors. As the sun began to set, painting the canyon walls in brilliant shades of red and gold, Marcus made his decision about how to proceed. He had identified 3 key rocks that were supporting the main boulder. If he could move them in the right sequence, using his horse and rope as leverage, he might be able to shift the big rock just enough. "Thunderbear," he called, "I think I have a plan, but it's going to be dangerous. If something goes wrong—" "Understand, Marcus," came the calm reply. "I have been ready to die for 3 days. If the spirits want me to live, your plan will work. If not, I go to join my ancestors with honor." The matter-of-fact way Thunderbear spoke about death struck Marcus. There was no fear in his voice, no pleading or desperation, just acceptance and courage. It made Marcus more determined than ever to make this rescue work. As darkness began to fall, Marcus made camp nearby. He would need good light to attempt the rescue, and he was exhausted from the day's work in the heat. He built a small fire and settled down for the night, but sleep didn't come easily. Tomorrow would determine whether Thunderbear lived or died, and the weight of that responsibility pressed heavily on Marcus's mind. "Marcus!" Thunderbear's voice drifted through the darkness. "Yes. Thank you for staying." Most men would not. Marcus stared up at the stars, filling the desert sky. "Most men haven't spent 3 years learning about this land and its people," he replied. "Get some rest, Thunderbear. Tomorrow we're getting you out of there." In the distance, a coyote howled, and somewhere an owl called out into the night. The desert was never truly quiet, Marcus had learned. It was full of life and sound and movement for those who knew how to listen. And tomorrow, if everything went according to plan, it would witness the beginning of an unlikely friendship between 2 very different men. Dawn broke clear and bright over the canyon, but Marcus had been awake for an hour already. He had spent the time checking and rechecking his equipment. He had rope, his horse, some wooden stakes he'd cut from a dead tree, and, most importantly, a clear plan. Now, he just had to execute it without getting Thunderbear killed. "Good morning, Thunderbear," Marcus called as he approached the rock pile. "Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready since the rocks fell," came the steady reply. "My father taught me that a warrior must be prepared for anything. Today is a good day to live or to die." Marcus took a deep breath and began positioning his equipment. The first rock he needed to move was about the size of a barrel, wedged under the main boulder. If he could pull it out using his horse and rope, it might cause the big rock to shift slightly. The key was doing it slowly and carefully. He wrapped the rope around the smaller rock, making sure the knot was secure. Then, he led his horse, a sturdy mare named Belle, into position. Belle had been with him for 2 years and trusted him completely. She would be steady and reliable, which was exactly what this job required. "Thunderbear, when I start pulling, you need to be ready to move fast if the big rock shifts toward you," Marcus warned. Can you still move your legs? Yes, but not much. The big stone presses on my right leg. I think it's not broken, but it is trapped good. Marcus nodded and gave Bell the signal to pull slowly. The rope grew taut, and he could see the smaller rocks starting to move. Inch by inch, it slid out from under the main boulder. Marcus held his breath, watching for any sign that the big rock was becoming unstable. Suddenly, there was a grinding sound, and the main boulder shifted slightly. Thunder Bear let out a grunt, but then called, "Good. Is better now. More room for my leg." The first phase had worked. Marcus felt a surge of hope, but he knew the next step would be even more dangerous. The second supporting rock was larger and positioned differently. If it came loose too quickly, the whole pile could collapse. As Marcus repositioned his rope, he heard Thunder Bear singing quietly in Apache. The melody was haunting and beautiful, echoing off the canyon walls. "What are you singing?" Marcus asked as he worked. "Song my grandmother taught me," Thunder Bear replied. "Song for when danger comes. It asks the spirits of this place to watch over us." Marcus found the singing oddly comforting as he worked. There was something peaceful about it that helped calm his nerves. He had never been a particularly religious man, but out here in the vast desert, surrounded by such ancient beauty, it was easy to believe in spirits and powers beyond human understanding. The second rock proved more stubborn than the first. Marcus had to reposition Bell several times to get the right angle. Each time the rope went taut, both men held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, the rock came free. This time the shift in the main boulder was more dramatic. There was a loud rumble, and dust filled the air as several smaller stones rolled away from the pile. When the dust settled, Marcus could hear Thunder Bear breathing heavily. "Thunder Bear, are you all right?" "Yes, much better now. I can move both legs, but still trapped." Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead and assessed the situation. The main boulder had definitely moved, but not enough to free Thunder Bear completely. One more supporting rock needed to come out, but this one was the most dangerous. It was positioned directly under the center of the big rock. If Marcus miscalculated this final pull, the entire weight of the boulder could come crashing down. "Thunder Bear, this next one is the biggest risk," Marcus called. "Are you ready?" "Marcus!" Thunder Bear's voice was serious. "If this does not work, you must leave quickly. My father will not blame you. You have done more than any man should do for a stranger." "We're not strangers anymore," Marcus replied, "and this is going to work." Marcus spent extra time positioning everything perfectly for this final attempt. He moved Bell to a different angle, one that would pull the rock out and slightly upward rather than straight out. He also prepared a second rope attached to a sturdy tree root, thinking it might help stabilize the main boulder if things went wrong. As he prepared for the final pull, Marcus found himself thinking about what Thunder Bear had said about his father. Chief Rising Eagle was known throughout the territory as a fierce leader who protected his people at any cost. What would he think of a white surveyor helping his son? Would he see it as a sign of friendship, or would he be suspicious of Marcus's motives? "Here we go," Marcus called and signaled Bell to begin pulling. The final rock was much heavier than the others, and Bell strained against the weight. Marcus could see her muscles bunching as she fought to move the stubborn stone. The rope stretched taut, creating and popping under the pressure. Then, suddenly, everything happened at once. The rock came free with a loud crack. The main boulder groaned and shifted, tilting away from Thunder Bear. For a moment, Marcus thought everything was going perfectly. Then he heard a different sound, a deep rumbling that seemed to come from the very heart of the rock pile. "Move! Move now!" Marcus shouted. The entire formation was coming apart. The main boulder, no longer properly supported, was beginning to topple. But instead of falling toward Thunder Bear, Marcus's careful positioning had caused it to fall away from him. Thunder Bear, freed at last, scrambled out from between the rocks, just as several tons of stone crashed down exactly where he had been trapped. When the dust cleared, Thunder Bear was standing in the open canyon, stretching his arms toward the sky. He was covered in dust, and rock grit, and Marcus could see that his right leg was swollen and bruised, but he was alive and free. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The magnitude of what had just happened, how close they had come to disaster, left them both speechless. Finally, Thunder Bear turned to Marcus with a smile that transformed his entire face. "You did it, white man. You have given Thunder Bear his life back." Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. He sat down heavily on a nearby rock, suddenly exhausted. "I wasn't sure that was going to work," he admitted. When that whole pile started coming down, Thunder Bear limped over and sat beside Marcus. Up close, his incredible size was even more impressive. His shoulders were broader than Marcus had imagined, and his hands were enormous. But his face, while weathered and strong, showed kindness and intelligence. "My leg will heal," Thunder Bear said, examining his injury. "But my debt to you will not be forgotten. You have saved the son of Rising Eagle. This is not a small thing." As they sat together in the morning sun, Marcus began to understand that this rescue had been about more than just saving one man's life. In the complex and often violent relationship between white settlers and Native Americans, acts of genuine kindness and respect were rare. What had happened here in this remote canyon might be the beginning of something important. Thunder Bear stood up slowly, testing his injured leg. He could walk, but with obvious pain. "My people's camp is half a day's ride from here," he said. "Will you come with me? My father will want to meet the man who saved his son." Marcus looked at Thunder Bear, then at his horse, then back at Thunder Bear. He thought about his job, about the railroad survey he was supposed to be completing, about the reports he was supposed to file. Then he thought about the opportunity that was being offered to him, the chance to meet one of the most legendary Apache chiefs, to see their world from the inside. "Yes," he said simply. "I'll come with you." Thunder Bear nodded approvingly. "Good. But first we must make offering to spirits of this place. They helped us today. We must show respect." Marcus watched as Thunder Bear gathered a handful of small stones and arranged them in a careful pattern near where the rock pile had been. He spoke softly in Apache, a prayer or blessing that Marcus couldn't understand but could feel the importance of. When he was finished, Thunder Bear looked at Marcus. "Now you," he said. "Spirits helped you too. You should thank them." Marcus felt awkward, unsure what to do. He wasn't used to this kind of spiritual practice. But something about the moment, about Thunder Bear's quiet sincerity, moved him. He gathered his own handful of stones and placed them near Thunder Bear's arrangement. "Thank you," he said quietly to the canyon walls, to the sky, to whatever forces had helped them succeed. "Thank you for letting this work out." Thunder Bear smiled. "Good. Now I go to meet my father. But Marcus, I must warn you. Some of my people will not trust you. White men have broken many promises, caused much pain. You will need patience." Marcus nodded. He understood that he was about to enter a world very different from his own, one where he would be judged not just on his actions today, but on the actions of his entire race. It would not be easy, but it would be an adventure unlike any he had ever imagined. The ride to the Apache camp was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. Thunder Bear, despite his injured leg, moved through the desert landscape with an ease and grace that amazed Marcus. He seemed to know every rock, every plant, every animal track. What looked like empty wilderness to Marcus was clearly a rich and familiar homeland to Thunder Bear. They traveled slowly because of Thunder Bear's injury, but this gave Marcus time to observe and learn. Thunder Bear pointed out plants that could be used for medicine, rocks that held spiritual significance, and animal signs that told stories about what had passed through the area. "See there," Thunder Bear said, pointing to what looked like ordinary dirt to Marcus. "Mountain lion passed here 2 days ago. She has cubs nearby." Marcus stared at the ground, but couldn't see anything unusual. "How can you tell?" Thunder Bear dismounted carefully and knelt by the tracks. "Size of paw print tells me female. Depth tells me she carries extra weight from nursing." And here, he pointed to a barely visible mark in the dust. Claw mark shows she was moving careful, watching for danger. Mother behavior. As they continued, Thunder Bear shared more about his people's way of life. He told Marcus about their seasonal migrations, following food sources, and avoiding the harsh desert summer. He explained how every member of the tribe had important roles, from the youngest children to the oldest elders. My people are not just warriors, Thunderbear explained. We are farmers, craftsmen, healers, storytellers. The white men see only our fighting, but that is only a small part of who we are. Marcus listened carefully, beginning to understand how much he didn't know about Apache culture. His work for the railroad had brought him into contact with various Native American tribes, but always in formal, often tense situations. This was the first time he had the opportunity to learn from someone willing to share their knowledge freely. As the sun reached its peak, they stopped to rest in the shade of a large boulder. Thunderbear's leg was clearly causing him pain, but he never complained. Instead, he used the break to teach Marcus more about the desert. Water is life in this land, Thunderbear said, pointing to a rocky outcrop. My grandfather showed me 19 places to find water in this area. Some white men die of thirst just few miles from good water because they do not know how to look. Marcus was fascinated. Could you teach me? Thunderbear studied Marcus for a long moment. Why you want to know? Most white men only care about taking from this land, not learning from it. Because I want to understand, Marcus replied honestly. I've been out here for 3 years, but I feel like I'm still a stranger to this place. You and your people know secrets about this land that could help everyone live here better. Thunderbear nodded slowly. Good answer. Yes, I will teach you. But learning takes time and patience. For the next hour, as they rested, Thunderbear showed Marcus how to read the landscape for signs of water. He pointed out certain plants that only grew near underground streams, rock formations that collected and held rainwater, and subtle changes in soil color that indicated moisture below the surface. When they resumed their journey, Marcus felt like he was seeing the desert with new eyes. What had seemed like a harsh, empty place was actually full of life and resources for those who knew how to find them. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus began to feel nervous about meeting Chief Rising Eagle. He had heard many stories about the Apache leader, some respectful, others fearful. The military commanders spoke of him as a cunning enemy who had never been defeated in battle. Other settlers described him as a noble leader who only fought to protect his people. What is your father like? Marcus asked as they rode. Thunderbear was quiet for a while before answering. He is strong, but also wise. He has seen much change in his lifetime. When he was a young boy, few white men came to this land. Now they come like ants, taking everything. This has made him careful about trusting new people. Will he trust me? That depends on you, Thunderbear replied. My father judges men by their actions, not their words. You have already shown him something important by saving my life. But trust is not given quickly by Apache people. Too many promises have been broken. As they crested a small hill, Thunderbear suddenly held up his hand, signaling Marcus to stop. In the distance, Marcus could see thin columns of smoke rising from what looked like a protected valley. The Apache camp was close now. We must wait here, Thunderbear said. Scouts will come to check on us. They have been watching us for last hour. Marcus looked around nervously, but saw nothing. Where? Thunderbear smiled. You will learn to see them in time. Or maybe you will not. My people are very good at not being seen when they do not want to be. Sure enough, within minutes, 3 Apache warriors seemed to materialize from the landscape itself. Marcus hadn't seen them approaching, even though they must have been moving across open ground. They were dressed in traditional clothes, with weapons, but not in a threatening way. They spoke rapidly with Thunderbear in Apache. Marcus could tell by their expressions that they were surprised and concerned to see him with a white man. One of the warriors kept glancing at Marcus with obvious suspicion. Finally, Thunderbear turned to Marcus. They will escort us to camp. You must stay close to me. Some of my people have had bad experiences with white men. They may not welcome you at first. The approach to the camp was carefully orchestrated. The 3 scouts formed a protective triangle around Marcus and Thunderbear as they descended into the valley. Marcus could see more warriors positioned along the route, watching but staying hidden. It was clear that the Apache took security very seriously. The camp itself was larger than Marcus had expected. There were perhaps 50 families living in traditional wickiups, dome-shaped dwellings made from wooden frames covered with grass and brush. Children played between the dwellings while women worked at various tasks. Men tended horses or crafted tools and weapons. As they rode into the camp, activity slowly stopped. People emerged from their homes to stare at the unusual sight of Thunderbear returning with a white man. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes on him, studying, judging, wondering what this meant. Near the center of the camp stood a larger wickiup, and from it emerged a man who could only be Chief Rising Eagle. He was not as tall as his son, but he carried himself with unmistakable authority. His face was weathered by years of leadership and difficult decisions. His long gray hair was braided with feathers and beads of rank, and his clothing showed the intricate beadwork that marked him as a leader. Thunderbear dismounted carefully, favoring his injured leg. He walked to his father and spoke in Apache, gesturing toward Marcus. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but he could see the chief's expression change from concern for his son to surprise, and then to intense scrutiny as he looked at Marcus. Chief Rising Eagle approached Marcus, his dark eyes taking in every detail. When he spoke, it was in clear, careful English. "You are the one who freed my son from the rocks." Marcus dismounted and faced the chief directly, but respectfully. "Yes, sir. My name is Marcus Thompson." The chief studied him for what felt like forever. Around them, the entire camp had gone quiet, waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, Chief Rising Eagle spoke again. "Thunderbear tells me you risked your life to save his. You could have ridden away, left him to die. Why did you not?" Marcus had known this question would come, and he had thought carefully about his answer. "Because it was the right thing to do. Your son needed help, and I was able to give it. That's all." Chief Rising Eagle's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "You say that's all as if saving life of Chief's son is small thing. It is not small thing." The chief walked slowly around Marcus, looking at him from all angles. Marcus forced himself to stand still and calm, even though he felt like he was being examined by a hawk, deciding whether he was prey or something else entirely. "You work for Railroad," the chief said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Railroad brings more white men to our land. Takes our land. Kills buffalo. Brings soldiers." Marcus nodded. "Yes, it does. I survey routes for the railroad. But I try to do my job with respect for the land and the people who live here." Chief Rising Eagle stopped directly in front of Marcus. "Pretty words. But what do they mean?" Marcus took a deep breath. This was his moment to be completely honest. "They mean I'm learning that this isn't empty land waiting to be developed. It's your home, and your people's home, and it deserves to be treated with respect. I can't stop the railroad from coming, but I can try to find routes that do the least damage." The chief was quiet for a long time, studying Marcus's face. Around them, the camp remained silent, waiting. Finally, Chief Rising Eagle spoke to his son in Apache. Thunderbear replied, and Marcus caught his own name mentioned several times. Then, the chief turned back to Marcus. "My son says you shared your water when he had none. You stayed with him through the night when you could have left. You risked your life with the falling rocks. These things speak louder than words." Chief Rising Eagle raised his voice so the entire camp could hear him. "This white man has saved the life of Thunderbear. He has shown courage and honor. He will be welcomed in our camp as a friend." Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he also understood that this was just the beginning. Being declared a friend was one thing. Earning real trust and acceptance would take much longer. Marcus spent the next several days living among the Apache, and every day brought new discoveries. Chief Rising Eagle had assigned him a place to sleep near Thunderbear's family wickiup, and gradually the people of the camp began to accept his presence. The first morning, Marcus woke to find Thunderbear's wife, Morningstar, preparing a meal over an open fire. She was a beautiful woman with kind eyes, and she spoke some English, though she was shy about using it. She offered Marcus food without being asked, a gesture that touched him deeply. "You must be hungry," she said quietly. Thunderbear says you shared your food in Canyon. Now we share ours. The meal was unlike anything Marcus had eaten before. There was a thick stew made from corn, beans, and meat, along with a type of flatbread that Morningstar cooked on hot stones. The flavors were rich and filling, and Marcus found himself enjoying the food more than any meal he'd had in weeks. As he ate, children began to gather around him. At first they were shy, peeking at him from behind their mother's skirts. But curiosity won out over caution, and soon they were openly staring at his pale skin and light hair. One brave little girl reached out to touch his hand, then giggled and ran away when he smiled at her. Thunderbear limped over to join them for breakfast. His leg was healing well, but he still moved carefully. "Children want to know about you," he said with amusement. They have never seen white man up close who was not soldier or government man. Throughout the morning, Marcus was introduced to various members of the tribe. There was Old Owl, the medicine man, whose weathered face seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. There was Swift Horse, Thunderbear's younger brother, who regarded Marcus with friendly curiosity. There was Grandmother Willow, the oldest woman in the tribe, who spoke no English but somehow managed to communicate her approval of Marcus through gestures and smiles. Each person Marcus met taught him something new about Apache life. He learned that the tribe was highly organized with specific roles and responsibilities for everyone. The men were not just warriors, as white settlers often believed. Some were skilled craftsmen who made tools and weapons. Others were expert trackers and hunters. Still others served as teachers, passing down traditional knowledge to the young. The women were equally skilled in their domains. Besides cooking and caring for children, they were expert gatherers who knew where to find edible plants throughout the seasons. Many were skilled in crafts like basket weaving and pottery. Some were healers who knew the medicinal properties of dozens of desert plants. On his second day in camp, Marcus was invited to observe a healing ceremony for Thunderbear's leg. Old Owl had prepared special medicines from plants gathered in the mountains. As he applied the treatments, he chanted in a melodic voice that seemed to echo through the valley. "What is he saying?" Marcus asked Thunderbear quietly. "He asks the spirits of the healing plants to help mend my leg," Thunderbear replied. "He also asks them to help you understand our ways, so you can tell other white men that we are people of peace who want only to live on our land." Marcus was moved by being included in the prayer. It made him realize how much trust the tribe was placing in him by allowing him to witness their sacred practices. As the days passed, Marcus began to participate more in camp life. He helped with daily chores like gathering firewood and tending the horses. He was terrible at first, but the Apache people were patient teachers. They showed him how to read animal tracks, how to identify edible plants, and how to move quietly through the desert. In the evenings, the tribe would gather around fires to share stories. Marcus loved these times. The storytellers would weave tales of ancient heroes, clever animals, and the spirits that lived in the land. Even though the stories were told in Apache, Thunderbear would quietly translate the key points for Marcus. One evening, Chief Rising Eagle approached Marcus as he sat by the fire. "Walk with me," the chief said simply. They walked to the edge of the camp, where they could look out over the moonlit desert. For a while, they stood in comfortable silence. Finally, the chief spoke. "My son tells me you ask many questions about our ways." "Why?" Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Because I want to understand. Where I come from, people think of the Apache as savages who only know how to fight. But living here, I see that's not true. Your people have a rich culture, deep knowledge of this land, strong families. I think if more white people understood this, things could be different between our peoples." Chief Rising Eagle nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but understanding must come from both sides. Tell me about your people. Why do they come to our land? What do they want?" It was Marcus's turn to think carefully. Many of them want a new start, a better life. The land back east is crowded, and there isn't always opportunity for everyone. They hear about the West and think it's empty land, free for the taking. They don't understand that people already live here. And you? What do you want? I wanted adventure at first, Marcus admitted. But now, I want to find a way to live that respects both worlds. The white settlers aren't going to stop coming. But maybe they can learn to live alongside the Apache instead of trying to replace them. The chief was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was sad. I have lived for 53 winters. In my lifetime, I've seen the world change in ways my father could never have imagined. White men came first as traders, and we welcomed them. Then came more and more. They brought diseases that killed many of our people. They brought soldiers who took our children to schools far away. They brought laws that said we could not live where our ancestors are buried. Marcus felt a deep sadness hearing the pain in the chief's voice. I'm sorry, he said. I know my people have caused great harm. Some white men have caused harm, the chief corrected. Others, like you, showed different ways possible. But there are not enough like you. They continued walking, and the chief showed Marcus sacred sites around the camp. There was a spring that had provided water to the tribe for generations. There were rocks with ancient paintings that told the history of the people. There was a small hill where Apache leaders were buried, their spirits still watching over the living. This land is not just where we live, the chief explained. It is part of who we are. Every rock, every tree, every stream has meaning in our stories. When white men come and change the land, they change our souls too. Marcus began to understand the depth of what was being lost as white settlement expanded. It wasn't just about territory or resources. It was about identity, spirituality, and a way of life that had evolved over countless generations. On his 5th day in camp, Marcus witnessed something that would stay with him forever. A young Apache warrior named Red Wolf had been injured in a hunting accident. The entire tribe rallied to help his family. Food was brought to his wickiup. Men took turns caring for his horses. Women helped his wife with her children. Everyone contributed something, and no one expected anything in return. This is Apache way, Thunderbear explained. When one person suffers, whole tribe suffers. When one person succeeds, whole tribe succeeds. We are all connected. Marcus contrasted this with his own culture, where individual success was often valued more than community welfare. He began to see how much white society could learn from Apache values. As his time in the camp continued, Marcus also observed the tribe's deep connection to the natural world. Nothing was wasted. Every part of an animal that was hunted was used for food, tools, or clothing. Plants were gathered sustainably, taking only what was needed and leaving enough for future growth. The Apache lived in harmony with their environment rather than trying to control it. One morning, Marcus was surprised to see a young woman he hadn't noticed before. She was sitting near Chief Rising Eagle's wickiup, grinding corn with a stone matate. She was beautiful, with long black hair braided with turquoise beads and intelligent dark eyes. When she looked up and saw Marcus watching, she smiled shyly before looking back to her work. Who is that? Marcus asked Thunderbear. Thunderbear followed his gaze and grinned. That is my sister, Bright Moon. She has been visiting our cousins in the mountains. She returned yesterday. Marcus found himself looking in Bright Moon's direction several more times throughout the day. There was something about her that drew his attention. She moved with grace and confidence, and when she laughed at something one of the children said, the sound was like music. That evening, Chief Rising Eagle called for Marcus to join him by the fire. As they sat together, the chief's expression was thoughtful. You have been with us for 5 days now, the chief said. You have shown respect for our ways and learned much about our people. Tomorrow, Thunderbear's leg will be strong enough for him to return to his duties. What will you do? Marcus realized this was a crossroads moment. His original job for the railroad was waiting for him. But the thought of leaving this community, these people who had taught him so much, filled him with reluctance. I don't know, he said honestly. I came here by accident, but I feel like I found something important. I don't want to lose it. Chief Rising Eagle nodded, as if Marcus had given the answer he expected. Change comes to all men, Marcus Thompson. Question is whether change brings wisdom or only confusion. As Marcus looked around the camp, at the faces of people who had become friends, at Thunderbear who had become like a brother, and At Bright Moon, who had awakened something in his heart he hadn't expected to feel, he knew that his life had been changed forever by his time among the Apache. But what that change would mean for his future remained to be seen. On Marcus's sixth morning in the Apache camp, he woke to find Thunder Bear sitting by his bedroll, fully dressed and moving without his limp. His friend's leg had healed remarkably quickly, thanks to Old Owl's medicines and the natural healing power of his strong body. "Today we hunt," Thunder Bear announced with a grin. "My father wants to see if White Man can learn Apache ways well enough to be useful." Marcus understood this was more than just a hunting trip. It was a test, and possibly his last chance to prove himself worthy of the friendship and trust the tribe had shown him. They set out before dawn with Swift Horse and 2 other young warriors. Marcus rode Bell, but the Apache men traveled on foot, moving with a fluid grace that covered ground faster than Marcus would have thought possible. They were hunting deer in the high country, where fresh water and good grazing made the animals fat and healthy. The hunt became a lesson in everything Marcus had been learning about Apache ways. The men moved silently, communicating with hand signals. They read the landscape like a book, finding signs that told them where the deer had been, where they were going, and when they had passed. Most importantly, they approached the hunt with respect for the animals they sought. "We take only what we need," Thunder Bear explained quietly as they tracked a small herd. "And we thank the deer spirits for giving their lives so our people can live." When they finally found their prey, Marcus watched in amazement as the Apache hunters worked together with perfect coordination. They surrounded the herd carefully, driving the animals toward a natural trap where they could make clean, quick kills. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary suffering. Marcus's role was mainly to observe, but when Swift Horse's arrow wounded a deer that tried to escape, Marcus was the one who tracked it through the brush and finished the job with his rifle. The Apache men nodded their approval at his marksmanship and his respectful treatment of the animal. On the way back to camp, the hunting party was in high spirits. They had been successful, and the meat would feed many families. But Marcus noticed Thunder Bear had grown quiet and thoughtful. "Something troubles you, brother?" Marcus asked, using the term of friendship Thunder Bear had taught him. Thunder Bear looked at him seriously. "When we return to camp, my father will speak with you about important matter. I think I know what he will say, but it must come from him." When they arrived at camp, the successful hunt was celebrated with the proper ceremonies. Old Owl blessed the meat and thanked the spirits of the deer. The women began the work of preparing the food, and children ran excitedly between the adults, caught up in the happy energy of the moment. But Marcus noticed Chief Rising Eagle watching him intently throughout the celebration. When the formal ceremonies were finished, the chief approached him. "Walk with me again, Marcus Thompson," the chief said. "We have much to discuss." They walked to the same spot where they had talked before, overlooking the moonlit desert. This time, the chief's manner was even more serious than usual. "You have been among my people for 6 days," the chief began. "In that time, you have shown courage, respect, and willingness to learn. You have proven yourself as a man of honor." Marcus waited, sensing that something important was coming. "My son tells me that when the rocks fell on him, he thought he would die in that place. He had made peace with this, but you gave him back his life. This is a debt that cannot be repaid with words or gifts." The chief paused, looking out over his land, his people's land. "In our tradition, when a man saves the life of Chief's son, that man becomes family. You're no longer outsider, Marcus Thompson. You are Apache brother." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the honor being offered to him. "Chief Rising Eagle, I am deeply grateful." The chief held up his hand. "I'm not finished. You have also shown interest in my daughter, Bright Moon." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. He had tried to be respectful, but apparently his attraction to the chief's daughter had not gone unnoticed. "Bright Moon is my youngest child," the chief continued. "She is 22 winters old. She has been asked for by many warriors, but she has chosen none of them. Yesterday, she came to me and said she would like to know more about the white man who saved her brother's life." Marcus could hardly believe what he was hearing. The beautiful, intelligent woman he had admired from afar had actually spoken to her father about him. "She is special daughter," the chief said. "She speaks 3 languages, Apache, Spanish, and English. She knows old stories and traditional ways, but she also understands that world is changing. She has wisdom beyond her years." The chief turned to face Marcus directly. "If you wish to court my daughter, you may do so, but you must understand what this means. If Bright Moon chooses you as husband, you will become part of this tribe forever. You will live among us, follow our ways, help protect our people." Can white man do this? Marcus felt as if the world had shifted beneath his feet. The offer being made to him was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Marriage to Bright Moon would mean becoming truly Apache, leaving his old life behind completely. It would mean choosing between 2 worlds. "May I have time to think about this?" Marcus asked. "Of course," the chief replied. "This is not a decision to make quickly. But know this, if you choose our world, you will be welcomed completely. If you choose your old world, you will always be friend to Apache people. Either path has honor." That night, Marcus lay awake staring at the stars. His mind raced with the implications of what Chief Rising Eagle had offered. Marriage to Bright Moon would be a dream come true. She was beautiful, intelligent, and kind. But it would also mean giving up everything familiar, everything he had planned for his future. The next morning, Bright Moon approached him as he sat by the dying embers of the breakfast fire. She moved with quiet grace and sat beside him without speaking for several moments. "My father says he spoke with you last night," she said finally, her English clear and precise. "Yes," Marcus replied, unsure of what else to say. Bright Moon smiled. "He also told me I could speak with you myself, to learn what kind of man you are." For the next hour, they talked quietly while the camp went about its morning activities. Marcus learned that Bright Moon had been educated by Spanish missionaries as a child, which explained her language skills. She had traveled to other Apache bands and even in Mexican settlements, giving her a broader view of the world than many people her age. But what impressed Marcus most was her intelligence and her deep love for her people. She understood the challenges the Apache faced as white settlement expanded, but she also saw opportunities for adaptation and survival. "Some of our young men think only answer is to fight until all Apache are dead," she said sadly. "Others think we should give up everything and try to become like white people. I think there must be a third way, keeping what is best of Apache life while learning to live in a changing world." Marcus found himself drawn not just to her beauty, but to her wisdom and her vision of the future. Here was a woman who could help bridge the gap between 2 worlds, someone who understood both tradition and change. Over the following days, Marcus spent more time with Bright Moon, always under the watchful but approving eyes of her family. They walked together in the desert, where she taught him more about Apache traditions and beliefs. She showed him sacred places and shared stories passed down through generations. In return, Marcus told her about his own world, about cities and railroads, about books and newspapers, about the rapid changes taking place across America. She listened with fascination, asking thoughtful questions that showed how quickly she understood new concepts. As they grew closer, Marcus felt himself falling deeply in love. But he also felt the weight of the decision he had to make. Choosing Bright Moon would mean choosing the Apache way of life completely. There would be no going back. On his 10th day in camp, Marcus made his decision. He sought out Chief Rising Eagle and found him preparing for the evening meal with his family. "I have thought carefully about your offer," Marcus said formally. "If Bright Moon will have me, I would be honored to be her husband and to become a true member of this tribe." Chief Rising Eagle studied his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "And your old life? Your work with railroad?" "I'll find a way to use my skills to help the Apache people," Marcus replied. "Maybe I can help negotiate better treaties or find ways to protect Apache land. I don't know exactly how yet, but I know this is where I belong." That evening, Chief Rising Eagle made a formal announcement to the assembled tribe. "Marcus Thompson, The white man who had saved Thunder Bear's life would marry Bright Moon and become a permanent member of their people. The announcement was met with celebration and approval. Bright Moon herself seemed pleased, but not surprised. Later, as they sat together by the fire, she told Marcus she had known he would choose to stay. "How could you know?" Marcus asked. She smiled. "Because a man who would risk his life for a stranger, who would share his water with an enemy, who would learn new ways with an open heart, such a man follows his conscience, not his convenience. And your conscience told you this is where you belong." The wedding ceremony took place 3 days later, conducted according to Apache tradition under the open sky with the entire tribe as witnesses. Marcus had never imagined he would find such happiness, such a sense of belonging, in a world so different from the one he had been born into. As he and Bright Moon began their new life together, Marcus understood that saving Thunder Bear from the falling rocks had led to the greatest adventure of his life. He had gained not just a wife, but a family, a people, and a purpose he had never known he was looking for. Thunder Bear, fully healed and stronger than ever, had become like a true brother. Chief Rising Eagle treated Marcus as a beloved son, and Bright Moon, brilliant and beautiful, had become his partner in every sense of the word. Years later, Marcus would look back on that day in the canyon when he first heard Thunder Bear's voice calling for help as the moment that changed everything. He had thought he was just helping a stranger in trouble. Instead, he had found his destiny among the Apache people, in the vast beauty of the desert he now called home.